I had just bashed a fancy SUV Jeep with my keke, and he was demanding for payments I could never afford. But this man was the same man who took everything from me, standing right in front of me. "Uncle, how could you do this to your own blood?" I yelled as I stood beside my keke. Well, let me tell you how it started. Growing up, life was sweet. My father, Mr. Ekubo, was a gentle giant and the backbone of our family. He had this way of turning even the most ordinary moments into something special. I can still hear his laughter. It was rich, deep, and comforting, like a warm hug. Every weekend, he would gather us in the living room and share stories from his own childhood. His eyes would lit up with mischief, and we would all hang onto his every word. "Mama, tell us the story of the tortoise again," I would beg, snuggling close to my mother under our colorful Ankara blanket. She would laugh and say, "All right, my little storytellers, gather round." Those moments felt magical. The smell of jollof rice would fill the air as my mother cooked in the kitchen. Her voice soft and soothing as she told her tales. Our small house in Lagos was filled with love, joy, and the kind of warmth that made life feel like an endless celebration. My father worked hard, running his iron steel company, which gave us a comfortable life. He was always teaching me important lessons. "James, money is good, but how you treat people matters a lot," he would say with that serious yet loving tone. I wanted nothing more than to make him proud one day. But life can change in a blink of an eye. Everything turned upside down when my father got sick. It was like a dark cloud had settled over our once happy home. No matter how strong my father was, the illness took him from us. I was just a child, but I felt the heavy weight of grief pressed down on my small shoulders. The day he died is one I will never forget. It was a Sunday morning, birds chirping as usual, but my heart was heavy. We had all hoped he would recover, but it wasn't to be. My mother and I were by his bedside, holding his hands, whispering prayers, but nothing could stop the inevitable. His chest rose and fell one last time, and then silence. It was like the ground shifted beneath my feet. I knew nothing would ever be the same. Without a will to protect us, my uncle swooped in like a hawk. He didn't waste any time. Pushed us out of our home. The home filled with memories of my father's laughter and my mother's smile. "Your father was foolish for not planning," he sneered, his face twisted in a cruel grin. My heart sank as I watched my mother's face turn pale. We had lost everything. I couldn't believe how heartless my uncle was. He didn't even care that the house was our life, our refuge. He just wanted it for himself. We were left standing on the street, clutching the little we had left. My mother's eyes were filled with tears, and my heart broke seeing her like that. It felt like we had been robbed of not just our home, but our very lives. "James, we have to be strong," my mother said, trying to comfort me, though her voice shook. But how could I be strong when everything I knew was slipping away? I wanted to fight back, but I was just a boy, and my uncle had all the power. That night, we found ourselves in a cheap motel with flickering lights and thin walls. My mother held me close, her warmth the only thing keeping the darkness at bay. "We will get through this," she whispered, though I could hear the doubt in her voice. I wanted to believe her, but deep down, the weight of despair was already settling in. Days turned into weeks, and my mother fought hard to keep us going. She worked multiple jobs, coming home late at night, exhausted and worried. I could see the toll it was taking on her. She was like a flower waiting under too much sun, fading right before my eyes. I remember lying in bed at night, hearing her cry softly, trying not to wake me. "James, don't worry," she had said when she thought I was asleep. But I knew she was struggling, and it tore me apart. The love that once filled our home was now buried under layers of pain and hardship. Then one evening, she came home looking worse than usual. She collapsed on the sofa, breathing heavily. "Mama, are you okay?" I asked, panicking. She waved me off, saying it was just a long day, but I could see something was wrong. Over the next few months, things got worse. My mother fell sick and we couldn't afford a doctor. One rainy night, I found her sitting on the floor, surrounded by our few belongings, crying. "James, I am sorry," she said through tears. I tried so hard." I knelt beside her, hugging her tightly as we cried together. "Mama, you did your best. You are my hero," I whispered, even though I felt powerless. Despite everything, she kept fighting, but her strength wasn't enough. I was there the day she took her last breath, holding her hand as my world shattered for the second time. In that moment, I felt utterly alone, lost in a world that had turned its back on me. After my mother passed, life changed completely. I was just a young boy, but I felt like the whole world had turned its back on me. Lagos was buzzing with life, but I felt invisible, like a ghost wandering through the streets. Everywhere I looked, there were people going about their day, but for me, everything felt empty. I didn't have a home anymore, and my childhood dreams seemed to be fading away. Days turned into weeks as I moved from place to place, not sure where I belonged. I was still young, and all the pain and sadness made me feel like I had aged overnight. My heart ached for my mother's warmth, her laughter, her hugs, everything that made life feel safe. But now, all I had were memories. And let me tell you, memories alone don't do much when you are feeling lost. I quickly learned how to survive in the city, dodging the busy crowds and slipping through the noise of Lagos. But whenever I saw school kids in their uniform, laughing and playing, my heart would tighten. I missed those days. I missed being carefree and happy just like them. One evening, I was sitting on a park bench, watching some kids play football. They were having the time of their lives, running and shouting with so much joy that I couldn't help but smile a little. But then, just as quickly, my smile faded. The loneliness crept back in, hitting me hard. Just as I was lost in my thoughts, a couple walked up to me. They looked worried, like they could tell something wasn't right.
"Hey, are you okay?"
The woman asked, her voice soft and kind. I looked up unsure of what to say. I wasn't okay, but I didn't want to tell them my whole sad story. "I am fine," I lied, forcing a smile that I knew didn't look real. They exchanged glances, clearly not convinced. "You don't look fine," the man said. "Why don't you come with us? We would love to have you stay with our family." I hesitated. Trusting people wasn't easy, not after everything I have been through. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my guard up.
"We are just a couple. Who cares about kids in need?"
The woman replied.
"We don't have much, but our home is open to you if you need it."
They looked kind, and something about their offer felt genuine. After thinking it over, I finally took their hands. They took me to their home, which wasn't fancy, but it was warm and full of love. There was laughter, good food, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a little spark of hope. They introduced themselves as Uncle and Auntie Okeke. They even had 2 kids, boys around my age, who welcomed me with open arms. It felt strange at first, being in a family again, but it was a good kind of strange. As the days went by, I started to feel like I belonged. The Okekes didn't treat me like an outsider. They treated me like one of their own. They enrolled me in school and encouraged me to study hard. I threw myself into my schoolwork, determined to make them proud. I didn't need to waste this second chance. Soon enough, their kids and I became inseparable. We played football together, told stories, and laughed until our sides hurt. They didn't know much about my past, and for the time being, I was okay with that. I wasn't just the boy who lost everything anymore. I was James, their brother. It felt like a new beginning. But at night, when everything was quiet, I would still think about my mother. I missed her every single day. No matter how much love the Okekes showed me, there was always a part of me that felt empty, like something was missing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't supposed to be here, that my real family was gone, and no one could fill that gap. Even though it was tough, I kept my head down and worked hard in school. I wanted to make something of myself, not just for me, but for the Okekes too. They had shown me kindness when I had nothing, and I didn't want to let them down. But as I got older, things got more complicated. One day, I overheard Uncle Okeke talking to his wife. "We love him like our own," he said, "but I am worried about the future. What if we can't afford to keep him in school?" Hearing that broke my heart. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to cause them any stress, but what could I do? I was just a boy, and the future was uncertain. As graduation approached, I found myself at a crossroads. I had big dreams, but the reality of my situation hung over me like a dark cloud. I didn't know what was next, but I knew one thing. I had to keep pushing forward, no matter what life threw my way. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of my journey. 15 years had passed, and life had taken me down a different path than I expected. Now, I was a keke rider, cruising through the busy streets of Lagos, like I had been doing it all my life. The noise, the traffic, and the never-ending movement, it had become my new normal. Lagos, with its hustle and bustle, was my world now, a place where both hope and struggle lived. Being a keke rider wasn't the future I had once imagined for myself, but it kept me going. Every morning, I would wake up before the sun, clean my keke, check the tires, and prepare for the long day ahead. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and it helped me survive. My passengers were a mix of all kinds of people: students rushing to class, workers heading to their jobs, traders carrying their goods. I had learned the rhythm of the city, and over time, I enjoyed listening to their stories. Some shared their dreams, while others simply needed someone to vent to. For a brief moment, I was more than just their rider. I was a part of their lives. Even with all the challenges, I never forgot the values my adoptive parents had taught me: hard work, determination, and kindness. I held onto their words as I weaved through the streets, saving every bit I could for a better future. I didn't have much, but I knew I had to keep pushing. There were days when I felt the weight of my past creeping back in, especially when I saw mothers with their children. It reminded me of the love I had lost and the life I once had. It was hard not to feel that sense of loss, but I knew that anger or bitterness wouldn't change anything. I had to keep moving forward. The streets of Lagos had become my second home. I found friends in other keke riders who understood the struggle of life on the road. We laughed, we shared stories, and looked out for each other like a family born out of the city's hustle. As the day faded and the city lights came on, the streets took on a new life. There was something magical about riding through the night. Music filled the air, the smell of roasted corn and suya drifted through the markets, and the city sparkled in its own way. In those moments, it felt like anything was possible. Still, a part of me longed for more. I dreamed of owning my own keke, of growing a business and being able to give back to those who had helped me along the way. I wasn't just driving to survive, I was driving to create a better future. But dreams can feel far away. And as I lay in bed at night, I would remind myself of how far I had come. I wasn't just that boy who lost everything. I was a man determined to rebuild, to reclaim what life had taken from me. And yet, fate has a funny way of working. Little did I know that life was about to throw something unexpected my way. Then came that day when my past and present crashed into each other, literally. It started like any other day, with the Lagos sun shining bright and me as usual, checking my keke, making sure it was ready for the day's hustle. I needed to make enough money to cover my daily expenses, and I was feeling hopeful. Lagos never sleeps, and the hustle is always on. As I drove through the busy streets, dodging traffic like a pro, my mind wandered to my dreams of a better future. I could almost hear my mother's voice always telling me, "You are destined for greatness." The streets were buzzing with life, people rushing to catch their buses, others flagging down rides. I picked up a few passengers along the way, chatting with them, sharing a laugh or two. It felt like just any other regular day, until it wasn't. I was approaching a crowded intersection when I noticed a sleek black SUV cutting through the traffic. Something about it felt familiar, but I didn't dwell on it. I was busy trying to pick up a passenger by the roadside when it happened. The sound of metal crunching against metal. My keke had collided with the SUV. For a moment, I just sat there, stunned. But when I stepped out to see the damage, I froze. The driver of the SUV was my uncle, the very man who took everything from me. My stomach twisted and anger bubbled inside me. How could it be him? Of all people,